Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live, new and improved. I think it's new and improved because ever since last week when we started our StreamYard software, we got through a whole broadcast without any issues whatsoever, and I am absolutely thrilled with that. And so we're going to get into the introductions in a moment. Tonight's topic is being myself, conscious deception. Being myself, conscious deception. Very excited about the write-up. Of course, I'm always excited about the write-up. It doesn't seem to matter who writes them. I love hosting them. It's beautiful. We lost Jen. I'm sure she'll be back. So we'll keep a lookout for her. And there she is. Okay. All right. Can you hear me okay, Jen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Welcome back. All right. So before we get started, we'll introduce the panel, and I'll start with myself. My name is Jason. If this is the first time you're hearing the broadcast, the reason I say that is because last week Renee was kind enough to let people know about our broadcast, and we had a bunch of new people. I'm hoping that some of them will return. But either way, welcome to the broadcast if this is the first time you're hearing this. And again, my name is Jason, and I am the main host of the show, but I have two excellent co-hosts, and I'll start with our friend from Australia, Glenn. He used to also be the producer of the show, but since we switched to StreamYard, I'm able to do that without any problem. So he doesn't have to worry about the headache that we had before. For those of you that have been steady listeners, you'll know about that. Welcome, Glenn. How are you tonight?
Yeah, hi, tired. Watched the tennis last night with Nadal. Oh my goodness. Went till 1:30 in the morning. So tired.
Tired. You're
Yeah,
tired, are
since
you?
I'm normally asleep by 8 o'clock, sort of thing.
You said you watched the tennis?
Yeah.
Well,
The
now
Australian Open men's final. Your mother would have loved it.
that's what I was about to say. That now I know you're aware that my mother was a huge tennis fan. I've talked about it a few times, but she watched all of it. She watched the Australian, she watched the Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open, and French, anything that was on tennis related, she was watching it. And she'd get really annoyed too if I would try to bother her while she was watching her tennis. Now, if I was willing to sit with her, which I oftentimes was, and watch it with her, then she could have conversations and stuff, unless it was a game point. And then we had to be quiet and watch with anticipation. Actually, because of that, I do have an enjoyment of tennis. Now, I don't have to watch all the various tournaments and stuff, but I do still kind of keep up with who some of the stars are and all that. And I don't know. So when I was young, it was Chris Evert Lloyd and Martina Navratilova and people like that were at the top of their game as far as the women are concerned. Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe, who has gotten into acting. He's actually not too bad at it, but anyway. Okay, and also with us on the panel is my lovely wife, Jen. Jen, say hello to the peoples.
Hello, peoples.
Oh,
Good to be here. I'm really tired tonight, so forgive my brain if it's a little skippy.
oh, you'll be fine.
Skippity-doo-dah.
Tell everyone why you're tired and what you did over the weekend.
Yeah, I had a lovely girls' weekend with my mom in Durham, North Carolina. So she drove halfway to meet me, and I drove halfway to meet her.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen her since March of last year, so it's been a long time.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Wow. When you said earlier that it had been a year, I was like, really? Gosh.
Like, whoa.
Time just goes by pretty quickly, I guess.
Yeah, it was a good weekend.
Yeah. And she
So
got
I might
home.
be yawning.
I don't know how it sounds to everyone else, but I think her yawns are delightful. I'm not going to get too mushy. I'm just saying I think they're delightful. That's all I'm saying.
It was a good weekend. I'm just tired. It's funny how you get used to sleeping with someone and then going out of town for a trip, and it's just very different and weird. So I didn't sleep as well.
Well,
Having your own bed and
I'm transparent enough to say that I did not sleep well in your absence either. It's weird, I'm 52 years old, and I spent most of my life sleeping alone, but I have gotten accustomed to having Jen next to me. And then so for the 2 nights that she was not present, it feels weird for many reasons. And I'm not saying that I am scared, but like I don't ever like go and check the closets and things like that. But I had a dream last night that I did that I went and checked all the closets and looked under the bed and did all this stuff. So obviously there's a part of me that's uncomfortable in that situation. So no more trips for a while, maybe another year. Maybe once a year you can go meet your mom.
She actually asked if we would be okay if her and Dad came and stayed with us.
Well, of course, we need to get a bed. We've been talking about doing that. And get a guest bed and put it in the other room there.
She said they have a nice what are they, air mattress that's like really tall.
Well, yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay.
We have plenty of room in both bedrooms. I would probably want to put them in the other. But anyway, we can talk about that off air, I guess.
We could do a whole show on that.
Let's just talk about whatever, let's make all our plans while people are listening. I think that sounds great. All right, Jen, take a few minutes and say hello to whoever is in the chat, please.
Okay, we've got Celine. We have Rachel, Nez Lover. Let's see. Glenn, the Poor in Spirit. Hello. Thanks for being here. And God bless you too.
Wow.
And I think that Jamie Grace. Jamie's here. Hello,
Jamie. I'm gonna put her up there. There's Jamie right there.
Yes.
I just have fun with this stuff. And there's Celine. Hello, Celine. Well, I'm sure there'll be more people that come in, and as they do, we will make sure and try to say hello to everyone. We like to make everyone feel welcome. And guys, our regulars in the chat, if you notice someone that you're unfamiliar with, please make them feel welcome and say hello. If you don't mind, that'd be great. All right. I think we have all the preliminaries out of the way, and so we're going to dive into this topic. Now, this write-up was done by Glenn. So we had Jen's last week, and so this week Glenn is getting back into the driver's seat, so to speak, with the write-ups, and so you have that to look forward to. And again, tonight's topic is being myself, conscious deception. And it starts with a quote: "Just be yourself. Let people see the real, imperfect, flawed, quirky, weird, beautiful, magical person that you are." The quote is from Mandy Hale. "We hear people say constantly, 'I wish I could just be myself.' This statement in itself prompts many questions, these questions being the core of tonight's broadcast. Let's try to simplify and break it into 2 parts. 1, I can't be myself because I don't know what that even looks or feels like. 2, I have made a deliberate choice to be or not be myself." This leads us to tonight's music, which is Conscious Deception by Gothic Storm. Music, it's by Epic Monday's Music Extensions, and the link is in the description. Feel free to take a listen to that. So what does myself look like? We are not speaking about an identity crisis, an enlightening exploration of self. Rather, the simple exercise of living out our daily lives and what comes with that. Another quote: "Be yourself. People don't have to like you, and you don't have to care." Unknown who said that, but very apt. Don't have to care. Does not mean literally, I don't care about you. It means it is not relevant to me whether you like me or not. Taking that a step further, really, it is just about acceptance and not the exercise of power. Being myself imposes an obligation to be true to oneself, and with that comes responsibility, your responsibility. Nobody else is within this picture frame. With that out of the way, we have a hypothetical scenario. You exist in a place devoid of internal comfort, live with emotional stress, and sleep leaves you unrested. Your mind is full, but thoughts provide little clarity. You feel isolated and can't understand why. Maybe, too, there's no real depth to life at all. Could these be signs that you are living a life that is not your myself, so to speak? Easier said than done, particularly if the whole shooting box is totally confusing and overwhelming. 2.1 above. 1. I can't be myself because I don't know what that even looks or feels like. So, some questions related to the write up. What does myself look like to you? How does your myself mindset compare with your myself enacted in daily life? Are there signs other than those described in the hypothetical scenario that may point to not being myself? How do we transition from not being myself to the open spaces? Tough question. No matter the circumstances, inhibitions, or possibilities, the question will always be, do I truly, madly, deeply, LOL, want to be myself and live that out each day? Now to point 2 above. 2. I have made a deliberate choice to be or not be myself. This is a whole different ballgame, and where the theme of the broadcast asks the question, is it a conscious deception when we choose to not be ourselves, and even to go so far as to mask ourselves? I hear people thinking, but there can be mitigating and uncontrollable circumstances, such as abuse and survival. Surely true. The thoughts are, what other reasons do people knowingly choose to be something they are not? Great question. Other than abuse, survival, etc., are ridicule, verbal put down, and opinions of others, etc., a sufficient reason for not being myself? Are there any circumstances where there are advantages in hiding myself? What are the possible consequences of not being myself? Is it possibly to not stay true to yourself and yet live fruitfully in the world? To conclude, Lewis Carroll reminds us, in the end, we only regret the chances we didn't take. Imagine the gifts you can bring to others by just being yourself. We'll read that again at the end. All right. Well, we have our work cut out for us with some of these questions, I can tell right now. These are some great questions. All right. So before we get rolling here, I'm going to go over the 2 points again from the top of the page. And by the way, everyone can read this in the description, in the comments, if you would like to follow along. I will put I'll try to put the questions as we go into the chat so that everybody can see them. I gotta move my screen here just a moment. Well, it's not working out for me. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay. Takes a little doing there. All right, there it is. All right, now we're going. All right. Let me just check and see if anyone else popped in. Yes, indeed. We will say hello to Helene, who popped in. Welcome, Helene, and also Debbie. Thank you for stopping by, Debbie. We are always glad to have you. Debbie will generally come say hello at the beginning of the broadcast and then at the end, which is great. Of course, we would love to have you, Debbie, whenever you feel comfortable. If you want to, stick around and make some comments and stuff, I'm sure everyone would love to hear things that you have to say. By the way, as we go over the questions tonight, if you want to comment on them in the chat, please do. And if I see your comment, I will put it up on the screen, and we can answer any questions. And I love sharing your comments with everyone as well. All right. So point number 1, I can't be myself because I don't know what that even looks or feels like. Point number 2, I've made a deliberate choice to be or not be myself. All right. And so we're going to scroll down to the first question. Now, under point number 1, I can't be myself because I don't know what that even looks or feels like. First question related to that is, what does myself look like to you? What does myself look like to you? And we'll start with Glenn on this one if you're ready.
Yeah.
No, my mouse. I had to drag my mouse over to the other screen.
That was good. Jen trying to imitate Glenn. That was interesting.
I was like, I can't do a low voice and an Australian accent at the same time.
Sounded like our Christmas tree.
Our poor Christmas tree.
Do you really expect me to be able to answer my own questions?
Well, sure.
Hey, we do it. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
Yeah. What is my? It probably looks just like what I am right now.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, what you see is what you get. That's. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question or good answer.
I'm being myself already. Yeah. So, yeah, it looks like this.
Okay. Well, let's pretend that no one else knows you at all. So
yeah, go for it. If you would like to articulate some questions, I'm more than happy to respond.
Okay. When you think of yourself, you had to describe yourself to someone that had never met you, and they were asking for some kind of details, and they said, what does myself look like to you? How would you describe yourself?
First off, at the top of the list, I would describe my value system.
Okay. Sure.
And then I would probably say, well, this is the big question. Can you narrow it down some?
Okay.
Because it's like that you could come at this through a million ways. You could say I'm X feet tall. I like racing cars, or anything. I mean,
yeah.
I guess when you wrote this out, Glenn, it's a little bit harder than you might have thought.
Well, that's the idea. I don't go to try to find responses to the questions before I write them out.
Sure.
I don't either.
I do it
Sure.
cold, without pre-done answers. So yeah, if I put myself in a hole, yeah, it'll clear up.
Well, at least you can admit that you put yourself in a hole. That's okay.
It's tough.
I do the same thing. So if one of the others does the write-up, then I do read it once because I have to put it in the box and make sure it fits the number of characters and stuff like that. But I try not to dive too far into it because the challenge for me as a host that I enjoy is answering the questions, and thinking what comes to mind in the moment rather than being prepared. So that being the case, what does myself look like to you? I liked where Glenn started to go. He's talking about, morals and values. And those are obviously a part of each person. I don't know if they would consider that as who they are or not, but I think it's reasonable to assume that someone's morals and values would definitely play a part. If I was describing what I look like to myself, I would say that I'm friendly and intelligent and funny and easy to get along with. Glenn used a word the other night, and this isn't betraying anything, but he used the word flex in a conversation we were having, and I just loved that description. To me, what that means is you're flexible in your relationships. You are willing to bend to be in a relationship with someone. It doesn't mean compromising yourself. It means flexing. It means that in order to have a relationship with someone, you might have some things that are different than they are. But to relate to the person better, you allow yourself to flex a little bit. It was a brilliant comment, I thought. So I would see myself in that way. That I try to flex in the relationship that I'm in, not trying to make myself someone I'm not, but to I don't like the word compromise, but it is a compromise in some ways. I would say that I am a good listener in most cases, and if I see a mistake, if I see something that isn't working, I will try to make adjustments. I don't just give up and throw my hands up and remove myself from the relationship. Just I give it time and attention. That's the best I can do. Yeah, I feel pretty happy with that. What does myself look like to you? Jen, what does myself look like to you?
Well, first, I wanted to say a hey to Annie popped in, and also Annette.
Oh.
Hey, guys.
Hey, welcome.
Hello,
guys.
Glad you're here. I thought it was so funny because I interpreted this question a little bit differently than you two.
That's okay.
I'm in the Glenn seat. So I was looking at it more of a generalized question, like being myself for anybody. For anyone, what does being yourself look like?
Yeah, I think
myself, yourself.
Sure.
And I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this correctly, but there's this feeling deep inside, I think, that, sort of like an unease when we are living life and not being ourselves. And I have found, and this is going to sound new agey, and I don't mean it to, but I have found that there's like this, almost like an equilibrium or something that you fit into when you are just being you. There's no trying to filter yourself or censor. It's like this cradled place. And then I got this really weird, funny word picture in my head where it's like this warm spot. And then I was thinking about a pool. I was like, you're trying to find the warm spot in the pool. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, that's pee. Okay, no. That's not good. But there's this cradled, like, just wonderful place that you find when you are yourself. It's natural. It comes easy to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like breathing. And I think sometimes when we're censoring ourselves or filtering and based on who we're with and if they're safe and all that stuff, it's almost like holding your breath a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that was my answer. So it's a little bit different.
That's okay. It can be different. As we've talked about before, we're not looking for a congruent answer from each one of us. We can all answer from our own perspective, and that's what we hope to do. Thank you. All right. Yeah. So, we got through the first one, and let me just look and see if anyone answered in the chat. Nez Lover says, I would say I am short, but with a distinct personality and strong presence. Well, I am sure that's true, Nez Lover. I'm sure that's true. So thank you for that. And I don't see anyone else. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the next question, and give me a moment to copy it, and I'll post it in the chat for everyone. All right. The next question is, how does your myself mindset compare with your myself enacted in daily life? All right. And there it is in the chat. Oh, hold on. Work with me. There we go. All right. All right. How does your myself mindset compare with your myself enacted in daily life? And I'll go first and give everyone a chance to not answer exactly the way I answer, of course, but to be prepared to be asked this question. how does your myself mindset compare with your myself and act in daily life? It has changed over the years. I think in the past, when I was young, I just acted like myself. There wasn't a separation between the myself mindset that I may have had early on and how I act in real life. And I think that's the problem for a lot of adults sometimes is a child before they have the constraints of society and the controls that people put on them growing up.
Yeah.
They are just themselves. And that can include some pretty blunt answers and comments made about other people. And you start to learn, hey, it's not appropriate just to be honest and say what you think about other people or about a situation. For instance, a child might be bored and they might just, blurt out, at some kind of gathering says, I'm bored. Whether they should say that or not is beside the point. They're bored, and they have no problem saying that. Or they might see a person and say, oh, he's fat. Not a great thing to say, obviously, out loud, especially in earshot of the person that they're referring to. So I'm not saying that a little guidance in some of these areas isn't necessary. I'm just making the point that there's no separation usually in a child's mind between the myself mindset and the how it gets enacted in daily life.
Yeah.
So in my case, of course, with all the constraints and learning and growing, I began to be more reserved in how I acted as myself in daily life. And the way I saw myself in my mind were oftentimes two different things. And now I believe I've come full circle, and the myself in my mind is being acted in daily life. Not in every case. I still, as I've shared on many of these broadcasts about feeling safe and things like that, I don't feel safe to completely be myself around everyone. I just don't, and I would like to. I hope that someday I will have come along far enough to be able to do that. But I must admit that at present, there are certain people that I know I don't know. I feel like I can't fully be myself with. That's not necessarily my fault. It's just that I know certain people are not willing to hear some of the things that are part of who I am. Like I'll use a topic really quickly that doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I used to be way more political, and I would have fallen into the right wing category rather than the left wing. And over time, I've learned, in my opinion, that they are two sides of the same coin. There's really no difference between the two, although they make it seem like there is, and they divide people up on one side of the aisle or the other. And I think that's intentional. Well, now, even though they scream different slogans, I look at them as the same entity. The coin of politics, no difference. One side is the same as the other, even if they have heads on one and tails on the other. It's all the same coin. But in the past, I would have stood up for what I would have considered right-wing beliefs or politics. And though I may still have some of the same thoughts and beliefs as I did back then, I do not make it a point to share that with other people or to try to change their mindset in any way. So the way I act in my mindset is the same as I would act in daily life, and there's no discrepancy in that area. But I would be more careful now who I had those conversations with. If I felt I was safe to talk to someone about politics, I'd be more than happy to have that discussion with them. But I think my grandpa said, my mom's dad said, 3 things you don't talk to people about: religion, money, and politics. Those 3 things are not polite dinner conversation. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but that's what I was told, and I think there could be some truth to that. There's my long-winded answer. What about you, Jen? How does your myself mindset compare with your myself enacted in daily life?
My story is a little bit like yours as well. I was laughing because, one of the girls I nanny, she just doesn't have a filter, and
Right.
and kids are
Right.
like that. They're very direct and they say how they feel. But somewhere along the line, through experience, we learn to hide parts of ourselves, and I think that's kind of pushed with society. You see, as growing kids, you see adults doing it and other people doing it, and you kind of learn by watching other people's actions. And so I'm in this place now where I'm coming full circle, like kind of like what you said, where I'm sort of peeling off the armor
Uh-huh.
very carefully and trying to stay safe while doing that. Being more aware of just people around me, who's safe, who's not, kind of a thing. But even around people that aren't safe, I still want to be me.
Right.
And so it's learning these hard lessons of, I am who I am, and I want to be authentically me.
Sure.
And when it comes to God, like, I want to honor who He's created me to be, And I think by us hiding and sheltering parts of ourselves, I do think it's a disservice to the creation that God made us to be.
Wow. Good point.
So that's my shorter answer.
Is that a dig, Jen?
No, I love your long answers.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
How about you, Glenn? Are you ready for this one? How does your myself mindset compare with your myself enacted in the daily life, sir?
I'll try to do a little bit better with this one. It couldn't be much worse, could I?
You could do it,
0
Glenn.
to 4. Oh, shush.
You shushed me.
Now I forgot what I now I didn't.
Oh, crap.
No, I'm fine. It's all good. Okay. 0 to 46. Honesty time. Mindset was different to varying degrees with what was enacted.
Right.
Reason.
Right.
I didn't really think that if I showed myself, people would even have any idea who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, what's the point in showing yourself if nobody's going to understand you? So I took the approach to shut up.
Right.
Of course, it didn't do me any favours because it's extremely frustrating when you live in the world and you think, well, I'm not on the planet. Well, I'm not on the same planet as pretty much
Right.
anybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
I was with my mum, but in general terms, yeah, on a different planet. Now, it changed at 46 when I got together with Sandra because I'd been, I suppose if you want to call it evolving, whatever, any word that you want to put on it, I'd been doing the hard yards.
Yeah.
And I'd already come to the realisation that there was no point holding back. If you really want to live, you got to let it out.
Sure.
So, of course, the perfect opportunity arrived, and like where it came from, the universe, thank you very much. So it's now aligned. From that point on, it aligned. And that experience of alignment with the lovely Sandra has really transitioned itself to pretty much everybody else. And now
Sure.
it's a case of, that's where the I don't care comes from.
Okay.
You know, if you don't show yourself for who you are, how do you really know what a person thinks of you? You can't, because they're not getting you. They're getting a modified version of you.
True.
So I got very uncomfortable with that. I thought, look, just let it out. Then people, if they don't like it, they can walk. If they do like it, stay. They do what they like. So the shorter answer is, right now, they compare 100%, or as close as you can get to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I think it's lovely that you gave Sandra some credit. You're saying at 46, Sandra came into your life and you adjusted, you changed based on your relationship with her. I think that's lovely and beautiful, and I feel the same way about Jen. I have made it very clear and have no problem being transparent about changes that have happened in me because of being in a relationship with Jen. And I probably correctly assume that that's going to continue. And I love it. I love being a different person because of the influence of the person that I love and who loves me. I think that's the way it should be. So if those influences are positive in a person's life, then it's nothing but a benefit. Now you can flip the coin on that one. If the influences are negative for you, then you can see where that would go, where it had a potential to go the other direction. And some people get to the point where they say they bring out the worst in me. Now that's a topic for another show, whether that's possible for someone to bring out the worst in you. Isn't that a decision that you make? You don't allow someone to bring out the worst in you. If the worst is being brought out by you, it exists in you. It's not the cause of someone else. But I think there can be some truth to certain people. When they're together, they rub each other the wrong way, or brings up triggers and cause things to manifest. So it's always better if the influence is a positive one. So great points, guys. Thank you for that. All right, we'll go on to the next question. And here it is. I was a little more prepared on this one. Okay, are there signs other than those described in the hypothetical scenario that may point to not being myself? Okay, so I will pull up the hypothetical scenario. Just a moment, guys. All right. Just a moment. Okay, hypothetical scenario. That was the in red, correct, Glenn? Yep. Okay, so the hypothetical scenario: you exist in a place devoid of internal comfort, live with emotional stress, and sleep leaves you unrested. Your mind is full, but thoughts provide little clarity. You feel isolated and can't understand why. Maybe too, there's no real depth of life at all. So then the question related to that is, are there signs other than those described in the hypothetical scenario that may point to not being myself?
I've got one.
Okay, go ahead. Why don't you start, Jen?
Anxiety.
Okay.
I think, like I was saying before earlier, there's this warm place that you end up resting in when you're yourself. And so it would make sense that the opposite would be true. If you're having to censor yourself or hide parts of yourself, it's not natural. When you think about being yourself is like breathing, it would be like holding your breath, and that could give anxiety.
Right.
I definitely think anxiety could be one. Those are some really good descriptions, your mind going and not being able to sleep well, and it just affects everything. It affects everything. And, I even had a time in my Christian walk where I had to come to this realization that I wasn't even being real with God. Like, I journaled a lot, and I still do.
Yeah.
But I remember journaling, and this is just insane to me now that I am thinking back on this. It was like I was journaling like a person that I thought God wanted me to be, and wanted me to journal and wanted me to pray. So
Interesting.
even in my relationship with God, I wasn't being authentic.
Wow.
And I finally got to a point, I'd have to go back and read through to find out when that point was, but got to a point where I realized, and that God helped me realize, that I wasn't even being real with him. And honestly, it started with the church. I've talked about this a lot on the show, where I'm very observant. And I think when you grow up with a parent that's angry, you just get very hyper vigilant.
Sure.
You start getting used to and good at reading people and reading body language and tone of voice and facial expressions. And so with church, I would see everybody putting on the happy face and everything's fine. And, marriage is fine, job is fine, kids are fine, or even great.
Mhm.
And when I would try to be myself and be honest in a group of believers,
Mhm.
it seemed to be met with such shock,
Yeah.
which was scary for me.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh. And then, I was always hoping, oh, maybe someone needs somebody to take the first step and open up.
Right.
And I would do it. I would take that shaky, scared step out and
Yeah.
open up, and I
Yeah.
thought it'll get the ball rolling. Other people will maybe feel more safe to share their stuff, and nobody did.
Wow.
And I was
Wow.
like, yikes. So if I were a turtle, I went back into my shell even
Right.
tighter than I
Sure.
was before, because I
Sure.
thought, wow, this is just really not safe and not okay. And I was getting that message that it wasn't okay by people's reactions.
Uh-huh.
I forgot what the
Wow.
question was, but yeah, anxiety.
Yeah, no, you answered the question. So yeah, the question, are there signs other than those described in the hypothetical scenario that may point to not being myself? And that's a good one, anxiety. Before we move on, I just want to point out, and very brave and transparent of you to share that even in your relationship with God, you're saying that you weren't being totally yourself with Him. And you even pointed out that in your journaling, you were journaling, and correct me if I'm mischaracterizing what you said. You're saying that even in your journaling, you were saying what you thought you should be journaling about, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I don't know very many people that would admit to something like that. That's amazing. Particularly since you're not in that place anymore, but to look back on your past journaling and see and recognize that you were journaling what you thought you should be journaling about rather than the actual the reality of where you were at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's more prevalent than we think it is. I think people do that all the time in social media. It's like posting things that you think you should be posting, or saying things that you think people want to hear. I mean, again, a topic for another show, but I think that the culture that we live in kind of pigeonholes people into a mindset that they think is appropriate. And if you don't fall in line with that, then you get strikes on your channel. You know,
Yeah.
if you're sharing things that aren't acceptable in the mindset of the powers that be, so to speak. So I think that's huge. And also, I admire how often and how much you journal. I envy that. I wish I journaled more. I love writing, and if I had filled out every journal I've ever been bought, my mom would buy me journals quite frequently, and sometimes I would fill them out. But the last time I really journaled a lot was the journal that I wrote for you, Jen, that I gave to the wrong person,
Oh
and
no.
she lost it. And I kind of, at that point, I get like that. I used to record music all the time too, and I had like those big double cassette things full of tapes
Mm-hmm.
that I'd recorded off American Top 40, and I'd even done some
Cassette tapes.
voiceovers on them and stuff, pretending I was a radio DJ and all that. And my truck broke down the side of the road, got broken into, and someone stole all those tapes, and I quit. I don't like that about myself. Like when something bad happens, I seem to just move away from it, when I wish I was better about that and would get over it. And I wouldn't say that to myself within a couple of weeks of having a loss like that, but it's been decades since.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I've done playlists and things like that. I mean, we don't really do the cassette thing anymore, but so I have gotten over that. And I have journaled, but I'm just saying, I admire people that journal a lot. I think it's important. The reason being, you can go back and look at where you were at a certain point in your life and determine how far you've come based on that. You can read your own words to yourself or to God or to someone that you love, and see how far you've come. I think it's very valuable. Okay, so I will follow you up, Jen, and anxiety is a good thing. And while you were talking, I was thinking in work situations, there are I can see many reasons why you would use as an excuse to not be yourself. I encounter this in my line of work. Now I work from home, but I have worked for a couple of different companies within that. And one of those companies, and I won't mention their name, but they do roadside assistance. And I had to sign a non-disclosure. I'm not sure how far-reaching that is, but just to be careful. I'm no longer working with that company, and without naming who it is, I will say it is probably one of the most gaslighting, narcissistic companies I've ever worked for. And that's saying a lot when you're working at home, that they would have that kind of control. But there was a culture in that, and they had an expectation that you act a certain way and that you just take it. You just take the gaslighting, you take the negative comments if you don't fall in line with what they want you to fall in line with their culture. And I really struggled because I didn't agree with who they were wanting me to be.
Yeah.
So every day I refused to do that, and it was a constant struggle. So I'm not saying I did fall into the not being myself, but I had to fight against it. That it shouldn't be that way. So work situations was what came to mind for me because of the recent situations I was in, where it would have been an excuse to not be myself if I would have fallen in line with the culture I was seeing, and just kind of being a mindless zombie and just picking up their slogans and following those. And when I knew, I felt it wasn't right. So that's my example. Work situations where you decide to not be yourself or feel like that's what's required. What about you, Glenn? Are there signs other than those described in the hypothetical scenario that may point to not being myself?
Yeah, I'll preface the response with the hypothetical scenario. I wrote that from a personal perspective, and when we read it out, it was pretty confronting, and it also was sad. I
Oh,
thought, you know, it's existing but not living.
wow.
So I've done that. Now I knew something. My answer. I knew something wasn't right. I was full well aware that it did all this scenario just didn't make any sense. But my issue was I had no idea what to do about it. Who are you going to ask? Who are you going to go to and say, look, this is me. What am I going to do about this? I mean, this being isolated, as I
Yeah.
said in the scenario, is extremely difficult
Yeah.
because if you don't relate, you're stuck it's like in a revolving door.
Yeah.
So was there something else? Yes, but it was that intuitively I knew this wasn't right or good or what I wanted, but
Right.
man, helpless, hopeless, had no idea.
Wow.
So shag on a rock.
Well, thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Interesting the situations we find ourselves and how easy it can be, in my opinion, to be someone else other than who should be. Yeah, just it's amazing to me. Let me check the chat, see if there are any comments from anyone. I don't see any. Okay. All right. I'm going to post the next question. And there it is. And there. Okay. How do we transition from not being myself to the open spaces? Tough question. How do we transition from not being myself to the open spaces? I'll go first on this one. I would say that first you have to realize that you're not being yourself. And in order to do that, you have to I would assume that you would have to realize who myself is.
Yeah.
Who are you? And that takes self perspective. It takes. I was trying to think of the word introspection. Is that right? I think so. Introspection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Diving into yourself, asking yourself, who am I? Who do I want to be? So once you have that figured out, and I think some people take a long time to answer that question, I'm still answering the question. I hope that I'm always asking that. Who am I? Who do I want to be? Those two questions, and then, you can pair them together. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that at least as far as I've come, I know myself fairly well, which I feel like I do. If I'm realizing that I'm not being myself and I know who I want to be, the transition comes from in the areas that you recognize you not being yourself, you quit. I know that seems like an easy answer, but you quit the not being yourself and step into a decision to be yourself in every scenario. Easier said than done, of course, but I believe it can be done. Looking at myself, I can see in the past times that I wasn't being myself, and now for the most part, I feel like I am. Not in every situation. Like I used the work scenario where I felt like while I was working for that company, I wasn't totally being myself. Because here's the truth: if I was totally being myself, and I did try to reach out to people and tell them what was going on. I reached out to upper management and let them know the experience I was having as an employee, really a private contractor. That's the way they have it set up. And I tried to share with them what I was seeing. Now, I didn't think that I was going to make any difference. Like they were going to listen to my comments and go, you know what, Crips, you're right. We're going to make some changes post-haste. Of course, I didn't think that, but I thought at least if I knew I was going to leave, I knew I was going to quit that company. I just didn't know when. That's a whole nother story, but I would love to tell that sometime, how supportive my wife was in helping me make that decision that was necessary for me to be able to move forward. So I was myself in that I at least took the time to say, hey, these are some problems I'm recognizing. But if I was really being myself, I would not have stayed in a toxic work relationship as long as I did. And I have to be honest about that. I have to look at myself and recognize the fact that I stayed longer than I should have. And why is that? I'm still answering that question.
Yeah.
I obviously, anytime there's money involved, it's easy to tell yourself, well, you have to make a living. In the society we live in, you have to keep the lights on and pay rent and buy food and all that. So if you're in a situation, an unhealthy work environment, should you stay or should you go? I mean, ultimately that's the question. And then you make personal judgments that say, well, it's not that bad. And, you do the things necessary to get through that situation.
Yeah.
But when is it too much? And I think each person has to decide that for themselves.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I have to say, I guess. Probably could say more, but in answer to the question, the transition comes from not being yourself to the open spaces by realizing who it is you want to be. And if you're not being that person, then you make changes. You make a decision, a conscious decision to be yourself more and more.
Yeah.
Okay. Jen?
Yeah.
How do we transition from not being myself to the open spaces? What do you think?
I know one thing that's really helped me, and I know a lot of people in the chat have experienced narcissistic abuse, and it's self-erasure. That article that I read the other day that just said it
Right.
so well, self-erasure. my ex seemed to hate everything that I thought was good about myself.
Mm,
And made it known in very passive aggressive ways, criticized, and so even though I still didn't know who I was fully when I had met him in the course of 14 years, I felt erased. I kept shaving, not even shaving off parts of myself because it was still there. It was more like burying. I was burying parts of myself that I really liked to try to please him and make him happy or get him to like me. Because in that place that I was in, I assumed that others' opinions were right and mine
right.
were wrong. Like I don't know what my mom and I talked about that this weekend. I don't know where that came from, but
Yeah.
I actually ended up doing a workbook that Michelle Lee Neves on YouTube
Right.
wrote, and it's kind of like a workbook to rediscover who you are because it's a very odd thing to bury yourself to the point where you kind of forget,
Right.
you know. And then in your healing journey, I found myself on the other end of it. Like, who am I now? I was still there, and there were still parts of me there, but it was like I had to rediscover myself. So, I think asking yourself questions, journaling for me has been great alongside this workbook to find out who am I? Because my whole life I've been waiting for other people to tell me who I am.
Sure.
And over the years, learning to look to God and to figure out with myself, like, who am I? Who do I want to be?
Right.
I think is very important. But I also think, and I'd mentioned in the chat earlier, it's like what happens if you don't like yourself
Mm,
and you're trying to be yourself? I was just pondering that, like, how does that go? And I guess it really comes down to if there's things about you that you don't like, you go on the journey of changing those things
yes.
and figuring out, okay, if I don't like this part of myself, who do I want to be, in a better light?
Yeah.
So that
I
is my
think
answer.
I think you answered your own question. I think you did that very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at yourself, you do the introspection, you find out you don't like who you are, then at least you're further along than a lot of people are. There are some people, I don't think they even ask themselves the question, who am I? Do I like myself? And determine that they don't, and then do anything to change it. I'm not saying there's no one. Obviously, there are self-help groups out there. There are plenty of them. And there are self-help books. So there are some people out there that aren't happy with who they are and they want to do something to change it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think psychiatrists and psychologists would have a business if people weren't, interested in finding out why they're so messed up,
Yeah.
So there's
The,
that.
the other thing I was going to say is there was a lot of things about me that I felt programmed to turn on myself and not like,
Mm,
um, that I actually did. But because I had someone in my life daily, on a daily basis, criticizing, and why else would someone criticize it if they didn't like it about you? And
right.
so I
Ooh,
started, because there was things in me that seemed to trigger him and make him angry and he didn't like it and he was trying to change me, then I assumed they weren't good. So I'd start trying to, but I ended up turning on myself and stopped liking those things about me and started hating them,
yeah,
because they were affecting this other person that I was trying to make happy.
right.
So undoing that too, after I left, was hard work.
Sure.
But it's just that self-validation of, okay, this person came along, they hated these things about me, but I love these things about me. So it's like a re-embracing of that.
Wow.
So
I love it.
yeah, I'm gonna run to the bathroom while Glenn answers.
Sure.
Mute.
Before we get to before we get to Glenn, Nez Lover made a comment in the chat, and I put it up on the screen. So she says, as a Christian, I have to love myself because we are commanded to love others as we love ourselves. Nez, we have talked about this, or I have talked about this on the broadcast many times, because this is the greatest commandment: love God with everything and love your neighbors yourself. And on this particular channel, we've talked a lot about this, and in Christian circles, there's a lot of pushback about this because I think people have the misinterpretation that it's somehow narcissistic as a believer to understand this concept that Jesus put out there that you have posted. And like I said, I believe it's a misinterpretation of what's being said and about what it means to be a believer, that we're not supposed to think highly of ourselves. Now, Paul said, he was obviously making a point. You shouldn't think of yourself more highly than you ought. And of course we shouldn't. And that was in reference to people going too far to the other end. But I believe, I agree with you, what you said in the chat, that in order to love others, we have to love ourselves. There has to be some self-love, and it's not a narcissistic self-love, as I've said. It's appreciating who you are as a person and knowing that because of what God did in sending his son, he has some love, at least, right? He has some love for us. And because of that, we should see some value. So I really appreciate your comment, and I appreciate the taking the time to put that in there. Okay, so getting back to the question for Glenn, how do we transition from not being myself to the open spaces? And then you added in parenthesis, tough question. I would agree.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I want to go back to a baseline a little bit further. I was in a situation that I didn't even understand transition was an option. I wasn't that smart. And I don't, well, maybe everybody else here is way smarter than I am. It's always possible. But I had no idea that I knew something was wrong. But do you think I could know what that was? Or was I thinking, well, who am I? What about who am I? What's myself? I wasn't thinking any of that. I was thinking, I've got to get up in the morning. This is all irrelevant to me. The fact is, when you're existing, you're in survival mode. You're not thinking, well, how am I going to do? Well, I wasn't thinking, how am I going to transition?
Right.
It would not have happened.
Right.
Put it on. I was not capable of doing this myself because I didn't even understand what it was all about.
Wow.
It took another person, whether by divine providence, the universe, pure coincidence, or luck, to pop in and point out to me some home truths.
Yeah.
And when that was pointed out, that was a very, very hard lesson. And I was very reactive when that was pointed out to me a lot. And I didn't take it well. So really, the transition was the influence of another person, which I didn't ask for. They just popped in when it was appropriate. But with that, it made me realise that oh, Glenn, you're so smart. You know everything. I realised I knew nothing at all.
Right.
I was being an idiot, a total idiot.
Yeah.
And I could go on, but you get the gist.
Yeah, sure.
This was the beginning of the transition. It took another person who was willing to put in the time and effort for me to give me the chance.
Wow.
For which I shall be eternally grateful.
Sure.
And which you've paid forward. That's how it was with me. You and Jason. I was so buried up to my eyeballs in toxicity. I couldn't see what I was in. I couldn't see that it wasn't okay. And to have you guys come along and see me and kind of see the situation once I started opening up about what was going on, that was huge.
Yeah.
And it was divine providence, I believe. It was the perfect timing.
Right. I believe that we're conditioned over time to forget. We really are. And I like the way you characterize that up to your eyeballs and toxicity. Uh, I think it is more difficult to see when you're covered up by it than it is from the out. Well, I don't think I know. So when you came along, Jen, and you had two people looking at the situation and you're describing the situation to us, it was easy to see, super easy to see because we're not in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So and we know that we know more now through Victorious Voices and I do from reading comments in chat in Victorious Voices made by people who've suffered the same offenses
Yeah.
at the hands of narcissistic people that don't seem to care one lick about them.
Yeah.
And seeing their pain and their discomfort and reading how they got out of it.
Yeah.
You realize that these folks have been conditioned.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I was going to say, because I was isolated. I was inundated with his presence because we had a business together. We worked together. So we were together all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And then, his truth, which was so incredibly warped and dark, became my truth.
Right.
His reality became my reality. And that's the way he wanted it too, I think.
Right. Sure.
And so, yeah, like it was this bubble, this reality that I was just so inundated, and took two people on the outside to look in that I shared with. And that's the other thing. It's really hard to share when you're in that place because you kind of know a little bit of what's going on and that it's not okay. And you want your friends and family to like this person that you're hitched to, and you're afraid to share what's really going on. Because a big part of you is even scared to admit it to yourself. It's like you're already miserable. It's almost if you're honest with yourself with what's going on, how can you survive that?
Yeah.
I think I ended up gaslighting myself and minimizing things and making excuses, and that became my world. And to have two people come along at just the right time, oh my gosh,
Sure.
Was huge.
Sure. Well, it's interesting you say that because with the conditioning, there comes a point where the person doesn't even have to gaslight you anymore because you do it yourself.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's conditioning, in my opinion. That's what that causes. So they get you started, and then once you get going and get on that, you described
Hamster
it,
wheel.
the hamster wheel, and he was like a Hitler with his little whip, and I'll reserve my comments to the whip, but he's cracking the whip, and then after a while he doesn't need to crack the whip, and you're just on the wheel
Cracking my own whip.
Yep, cracking your own whip
On myself.
Yep.
Oh yikes.
So that's interesting. Thank you both for your comments. Nuthouse is asking what gaslighting is, babe. Do you care to give your definition of that?
Yeah.
While you're doing that, I'll post the next question so you get people ready.
And I know there's people in the chat that have experienced that too.
Sure.
So feel free to share your definitions and opinions.
Sure.
So I could say that it's somebody that is denying your reality,
Mhm.
and they're making you question it. And so, gosh, an example would be, say you and your spouse have a conversation and you tell them, hey, like this happened to me, hey, I have a Bible study on Tuesday at 9.
Mhm.
And you're letting them know a week ahead of time so that they're aware and it's not this last minute thing. Because
Mhm.
for me, I was so afraid of them that I had this phrase that I would always go to at the last minute. And I'd say, by the way, I have da 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 da, because it would save me from like all of this time if I tried to tell him before and he's griping about it and starting fights and stuff.
Right.
But if I did try to let him know, because I was trying to stop doing the whole by the way thing because it was really ticking him off.
Right.
And that's not really honest and right
Right.
necessarily to be like that. But so the day would come around and I'd be getting ready to leave and he'd be opening our store and he would get so pissed off, like, where are you going? And I would say, remember last Monday, I told you that I had a Bible study next Tuesday at 9. And he would flat out say, no, you didn't. You did not tell me that. And I would say, yes, I did. We were at the house on the couch, whatever.
Yeah.
And he would adamantly tell me that I did not, that
Right.
conversation did not take place. And this happened so often that I started questioning my own memory.
Yeah. Your own
That I'm
reality.
sitting there like, did I tell him?
Yeah.
Because I was under so much stress and anxiety that I was very forgetful. I was clumsy. I would
Wow.
lose things all the time. You know, I'd forget to pay bills. Like it just, it was insane.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's crazy making. And so the way I was gaslighting myself
Mhm.
was doubting my own reality that I was in an abusive relationship. You know, oh, it's not that bad. You know, he just did that because he, you know, had a hard day, or, you know, just completely invalidating my own reality I was living in. So that can happen
Wow.
to yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. So, Mike, there are, I'm sure, other people, if you ask them what gaslighting is, they'll have a different description, but it's essentially all the same thing. And it fits, it's a broader topic. And unfortunately, I think now the word is so prevalent that sometimes people call gaslighting, if someone disagrees with them, they say, "You're gaslighting me." No, that's not what it is. So you have to be really clear before you start throwing the term out there what it actually refers to. It doesn't mean someone disagreeing with you. It means when you're using sentences and phrases to make someone question their reality. That I think that the way you described it, Jen, was good. But that's a pretty basic interpretation
Yeah.
for you, Mike. It's a little bit deeper than that. I mean, it can be a little deeper than that, but you did a really good job, Jen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the question. So the next question is after Glenn has a little separating sentence between this last question underneath point 1. No matter the circumstances, inhibitions, or possibilities, the question will always be, and then the question, do I truly, madly, deeply, LOL, want to be myself and live that out each day? Do I truly, madly, deeply, I know that there are some people that got the reference there, truly, madly, deeply want to be myself and live that out each day? And I'm raring to go to answer this one. I can say without any hesitation, yes, I do want that. I want to be myself. I want to live that out every day as myself. I don't want to be a pretend person. In fact, I have complained quite often when I see fake people that I know are pretending to be someone that they're not. And I'm pretty good at spotting them. And you have to ask yourself, if you get triggered by something, and it's a pretty deep trigger, I always ask myself, okay, why am I getting so triggered by this? Because sometimes the answer is because you see something in someone else that reminds you, and it irritates you even more because you have that, or you're afraid you have that in yourself. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, at least for me, if I'm getting really angry at something that someone else does or says, I have to examine to see why it's making me so angry, and just make sure that the reason it's making me angry isn't that it's because I struggle with the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not making this up. This is something people have studied about triggers and about it being something that you recognize in someone else, and the reason it gets to you so much is because in some cases you might struggle with that yourself, so you notice it even more in someone else. You recognize it. And I saw this a lot with my dad. My dad would do something or say something, and it would really trigger me, and then I would look at myself and realize, and I in this case I probably did pick it up from him. But I, as an adult, I want to make the decision, if I'm going to treat someone in any way, I want to make sure that's the way I want to treat them, not because, well, I learned this from my dad, or I learned this from my mom, or whatever. I want to decide who I'm going to be and how I'm going to treat people, not because it's the way I was raised, or because I was conditioned or programmed by anyone. Anyway. Okay.
Thank you,
So,
Jason.
thank you. So yes, I desperately want to live this way, truly, madly, deeply, to be myself. And I think for the most part, if I was grading myself, I'd give myself on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give myself an 8. And maybe that's too high, but I
No,
feel,
that's the number I was thinking.
yeah, well, thank you. I feel like I'm doing a fairly good job. Is there room for improvement? Yes, there's those 2 points. I would like to come back a year from now and say I'm at a 10, if we have this conversation again. I think it's a challenging question that Glenn put in there, and I love it. It's great. So that's my answer. What about you, Jen? Do you truly, madly, deeply want to be yourself and live that out each day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And where I'm at right now, it's weird. It's a tug of war a little bit. I still have these old habits where I'm just hyper vigilant on how I'm coming across to people. I'm normally, either at home with Jason, which as you know, I have such a safe place here. I don't even have to think
Right.
about how I'm coming across or, whatever. It's just like breathing. But even with the girls, 2 of the girls I nanny are teenagers, and they're broody and quiet. And I remember when I first started working the job, it would be silent in the car after I picked him up from school, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if you guys could have heard my brain, you'd be like, wow, Jen, you're insane. You need to be in a straitjacket. I'm like, what are they thinking? Do they like me? Am I asking too many questions? Are they mad at me? Did I say something wrong? Like, holy crap. And now I've gotten to the place where, I've gotten comfortable with them and they've gotten comfortable with me, where sometimes we have like the best discussions in the car on the way home.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they're quiet, I've gotten to know them, and they are both like me in the sense where they're very active inside their minds. They think a lot.
Sure.
And it's, and I have to tell myself, okay, Jen, not everything's about you. Like, I was talking to my mom about that this weekend. We were laughing. And just allowing them to be them, if they want to talk. And, sometimes I'll test the waters. I'll ask them questions. And if it's short answers and they go quiet again, I'm like, okay, they're just, they're in their mind and they're thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm completely comfortable. But yeah, so I'm in this transition with breaking away from these old habits of just being way over hyper vigilant on how I'm coming across to people and just be. And I'm not there yet. I'd probably say I'm a 7.
Okay.
On a scale to 1 to 10, and I'm getting there. It's tough.
Sure.
Pulling away those layers of just old habits, of being just overly concerned. Because I think that is why we cover up. I think that is why we censor ourselves and filter
Sure.
ourselves. Why else would we?
Sure.
If we weren't trying to somehow manage how we're coming across to other people.
Right.
Because if you think about it, if you were with yourself all the time and there weren't any other people around, would you do that? No, I don't think. I think you would just be you.
Right. Right.
So that's my answer.
Thank you, Jen. Before we ask Glenn, Nez Lover says, at age 50, I feel comfortable in my own skin, not perfect, a work in progress, happy to be alive despite my flaws and imperfections. This life is a classroom.
Oh, I love that.
Wow, great, Nez. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And we'll say hello to our buddy John. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Make sure and say hello to him in the chat. He just popped in. All right, so let me scroll back up to the question and we'll ask it again to Glenn. Wow. Where'd it go? Well, I can. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, obviously, yes, but taking that a little step further, I don't know how to do it any other way nowadays. I'm sort of conditioned so far beyond the not being myself, it's
Right.
automatic.
Right.
But I want to make a point here, a little outside but relevant, and I don't think Crips will mind if we relate a conversation.
Nope, not at all.
About sometimes how I personally speak, and I'm attracted to strong, pragmatic people.
Sure.
And I'm very down the line, as people will know. I just call it straight out.
Right.
Now, in a conversation with Crips the other day, he said, well, you realise that sometimes that really sort of, you could call it hard-nosed or whatever. You could put any kind of description on you like, but it's pretty straightforward, short, sweet, to the point.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, not everyone's in a position where that works so well. And I was just thinking about it as we were going through this stuff. I thought, yeah, really, that is a fair point, because not everybody is in the same position as a strong, pragmatic person.
Right.
And there's a lot of different people out there. And I think and this reflection is sort of, it's very reasonable. I think that you can still be yourself without compromising yourself, but trying to be more aware of the place that the other person's in. So
Yes.
this is a message for someone who may listen to the show later. It's a personal message, but I think it's very relevant across the board. So yeah, Chris, if you want to expand that, by all means. But I think it was an extremely valuable and insightful point you brought up, and I've taken that on board.
Well, thank you, Glenn, for sharing that. Yes. So the idea that despite how comfortable we may be being blunt, there are lots of words for direct, straightforward, on the nose. Now, I'm a person that appreciates that. And here's why. I appreciate, even if it hurts my feelings, I appreciate someone being honest and upfront more than I do someone that is all agreeable, but they're not being authentic or honest, and they're thinking something else, and you
Yeah.
find out later.
Well,
So,
we were just talking about my mom earlier. That's a great example.
oh, go ahead, Jen.
When when Jason came to visit me, my mom was very concerned, and rightly so. She was concerned about me getting into a relationship so soon after I
Right.
left my
Right.
marriage. And so Jason came to visit, and we were sitting down at the kitchen table, and she was like interrogating him, like all of these question after question. And I was horrified, and I ended up leaving. It made me so angry. I like went upstairs to like breathe. I was just so upset. And but Jason handled it like a trooper, and he said later, and he was mentioning it again today, how grateful he was that she was so direct, because he didn't want someone that played games or acted nice, but they had all these questions underneath the surface,
Yeah.
because they were concerned and so on and so forth.
Right.
So it's just a great example on the tail of what you had said.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just making the point to Glenn that while I appreciate Glenn being straightforward and on the nose and blunt, I understand Glenn, and I feel like I've had a lot of time to get to know him, and so when he says things, it doesn't even register for me as hurtful or too much, right? But not everyone is going to be in that place, and there are a lot of factors. They may not know him in the same way I do. If they do know him, they may be recovering from abuse. They might have had that a lot in their life, and they respond negatively to that. It just requires a little finesse and making sure that you're being emotionally supportive. So I didn't suggest that you, Glenn, stop being direct. It's just before you can be direct, you have to make sure that the person knows that you're being supportive. That's all. And you can do both. You, in my opinion, you make sure that you're being emotionally supportive first, and then once that is taken care of, then you can be direct. And I believe that most people in a relationship with someone that's direct, you realize that they're being direct, and it down the line, it's going to get a lot easier for you to take it. So yes, this was a private conversation that Glenn and I had yesterday evening, and I was thrilled that he seemed to take it on board, and that's what this relationship should be all about. I've learned a lot from Glenn, and I've learned a lot from Jen. I've learned a lot from Annie. I've learned a lot from a number of people that take the time to invest in a relationship, and Glenn has certainly done that with each of us. and for him to be able to learn. I think that people make a mistake when they have the attitude as, well, I have more life learning and lessons than these young folks. I'm not young by any comparison. I'm just making the point. When you say to yourself, well, I can't learn anything from anyone that hasn't walked in my shoes, I think that's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I can learn from an 18-year-old. I can learn from a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
You can learn from anybody if you are open to it.
Yeah.
So don't shut yourself off to that. And so to capsulize it, it's just simply realizing that not everyone has the same reception to the same techniques. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Glenn. Thank you. Want to say hello to Kelly Ann Dean, who popped in the chat while we were in the middle of that. Thank you. We're glad to see you again. Welcome. All right. And okay, did you answer the question? I got distracted by that in a good way. Do you truly, madly, deeply want to be yourself and live that? I think you did answer it.
Yeah, I said I can't do it any other way now. It's
Right.
automatic.
Okay. That's right. Thank you. Thank you. I love that answer. I mean, it could seem like a pat answer in some ways, but I hope that everyone gets to that point where they don't even have to think about being themselves, being yourself in any situation, where you just are. You just are yourself all the time. I think that's great. And it doesn't mean, so as I said earlier, Glenn used the word last night in our conversation, flex. And I think it's a great word. Obviously I do, because it's the second time I've mentioned it. It's being flexible. It's the shorter version of flexible. So you're being flexible in the relationship. The concern is, we don't want to compromise ourselves. We don't want to set aside parts of our personality in order to be in a relationship with someone, but nobody's asking you to do that. When I say nobody, in a healthy relationship, the other person isn't saying, hey, in order to be in a relationship with me, I want you to sacrifice parts of yourself that are important to you. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. No, nobody's saying that. But we are flexible. We do change things, in my opinion. And that's marriage, that's friendships, that's everything. It's just being willing to, when we realize that something needs to be adjusted, we adjust it. That's it. You're still yourself. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're not having to, reinvent the wheel. You're just being flexible. I think it's a great thing. Okay. So did everyone answer that question? I think we did. Okay.
So.
To point 2. Now we're to point 2 and the questions related to that. So point number 2, as a reminder, I have made a deliberate choice to be or not be myself. I've made a deliberate choice to be or not be myself. This is a whole different ball game, and where the theme of the broadcast asks the question. And so the first question is it a conscious deception when we choose to not be ourselves and even go so far as to mask ourselves? I'm going to pop that in the chat just a moment. And while I'm doing that, Glenn, if you could fill that in a little bit for us, the idea of conscious deception. Conscious deception mean
Sure.
Is it like willful lie?
Well, if you're in communication with another person and you've chosen not to be yourself, are you being deceptive?
Oh,
Would that come under how you would see deception? Some might see it, as I said, as protection, because
Right.
there are circumstances outside of normal.
Sure.
But if you are not being yourself as a way of being, just because you just are that way,
Yeah.
and you just live up, and you really project outward something that is not you, are you being deceptive?
Right. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you explaining that. So to me, it depends on whether you realize it or not. like I think there are some people that don't realize they're not being themselves. So for the sake of answering the question appropriately, let's say that the person is aware of who they really are. If they decide to not be themselves, yes, it is a conscious deception. They are aware of the deception. I'm not saying that's everyone. I think that there are plenty of people out there that they don't know themselves well enough to know that they're lying about who they are. I mean, I think that's probably a fair point. But the more a person, takes the deep dive into themselves, the more they dig, the more they learn about themselves, and then when they get to that point, they can make a conscious decision not to be deceptive. And then the second part of the question, even to go so far as to mask themselves or mask ourselves. Yeah, I don't like masks. This concept has been around. I didn't come up with it, but the idea of people wearing masks has been going on throughout history. I mean, the Greeks, who, most people in the theater realm, I think they have determined that the Greeks were the first to put on live stage plays. And it was all men actors playing women sometimes. But in order to do that, they would wear a mask. They would all wear masks. So people have been wearing masks for a long time, literally and figuratively. And I don't think it's ever a good thing. We've had this stuff going on health-wise all over the world here over the past 2 years. And the whole idea of wearing a mask, and I'm not making a point about whether it's effective or ineffective, but seeing these people with these face coverings all over, and you can't see their smile, you can't see what kind of expression they have on their face. I don't think it's a good thing. Just the mask wearing itself, okay? Because it separates people, in my opinion. So if I have a problem with a physical mask, then if we're talking about an internal mask, a spiritual or emotional or mental mask that a person wears to hide themselves or to keep themselves away from other people, I'm not going to like that either. Certainly don't like it in myself. I don't want to wear a mask. I want what people to see to be the reality, the real me. That's what I want. That's what I hope to be. Glenn says in the chat, it was meant as a metaphorical mask. Yeah, I understand that. I was just making a point about the actual physical covering, wearing the mask is it's an analogy to the metaphorical mask. At least in my mind, it is. So yes, I would say that it is a conscious deception. What do you think, Jen? Is it a conscious deception when we choose to not be ourselves? It even goes so far as to mask ourselves.
A conscious deception, like we're
Yeah.
consciously doing it?
Yeah, they're knowingly being deceptive.
I think it can be both. Looking back at my own journey, I didn't realize I was doing it when I was younger. And even in the marriage, I knew that he didn't like stuff, and I don't know, it's kind of muddled. Now when I do it, yeah, I think too, when you have a relationship or relationships where you can be yourself, it makes the difference more stark. The difference between you being yourself and being open and authentic with people and having that practice versus the people that you're around, whether at work or whatever, certain friendships or anywhere, where you're just curbing who you are, filtering, censoring who you are.
Yeah,
I think it becomes more, what's the word? Recognizable.
Sure.
Yeah, it was so what I knew to do. It was so ingrained in me when I was younger that I just, again, it just like right now being me is like breathing. I think censoring me back then was like breathing.
Right.
It was so weird.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. What about you, Glenn? conscious
So many
deception.
times I've heard people say, if only I'd known what you were really like before we ended up together. You
Oh,
heard that before? That sounds to me like someone saying you deceived me. Now,
yeah,
whether it was conscious or subconscious or whatever, it was still deception because that's how it plays out.
sure.
Yeah, like, do you know? I know probably quite a few people who are in this miserable place
Yeah,
because they signed up on a long-term plan, but the interest repayments got overwhelming.
yeah,
Like so, yeah, I think it is deceptive. But if you do it when you're supposedly in a healthy place, it's way worse
right.
because
Oh, yeah,
then you really do know that it's just not on.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
don't think a person in a healthy place is going to do it. That's
No,
the other point. That's the sort of the other side of the coin. So
yeah, it's the
yeah,
caveat.
in general terms, I'd say if you consciously do it, it's deceptive.
Yeah. And in fact, Annette says in the chat, I don't think most people do it on purpose. That's what Annette thinks. And then Nez says, I don't pretend to be anybody else but myself, but there are times when I am simply a lot more subtle and quiet about it. That's a good point. So we would, in this conversation, we would have to ask: is it always a conscious deception if we're not revealing parts of ourselves? We're not lying or hiding, but we're choosing not to share every bit of ourselves with others. And I'm not going to try to answer that. I'm just putting the question out there for people to think about.
Chris, I don't think it's necessarily deceptive. I'd say it's deceptive, but when you deliberately say something that is untrue, that's to my mind that it's just deception straight up.
Right. Okay, yeah, I would agree with that. That if it's untrue, if you're presenting something that's untrue, that is definitely deception. I would agree. I'm glad we put a finer line on it for sure. Okay, and guys, just to let you know, we are going to try to finish up at the top of the hour tonight. With Jen being gone for the whole weekend. So we're not going to rush through these, but we have a few more to get through before the top of the hour. And so I'm going to make my answers a little less long-winded. How about that? The next comment before the next series of questions, Glenn says, I hear people thinking, but there can be mitigating and uncontrollable circumstances, such as abuse and survival. Surely true. The thoughts are, what other reasons do people knowingly choose to be something they are not? What do you think, Jen? What other reasons do people knowingly choose to be something they are not? And he mentions in the sentence two examples, abuse and survival.
Two things. I think sometimes when people don't like who they are, they could try to be somebody that they think that other people would like.
Sure.
And the other thing I was gonna say, and this is very rampant with society right now, with
Yeah.
what is it called? TikTok.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this movement where people are just emulating people that get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And it
There's a
breaks
term
it
for it.
breaks my heart.
Yeah.
What's that term?
I'm trying to think of it. The one guy that we both watch, he uses the term. I can't pull it up, but there's a
Yeah.
term when people get attention in that way. It's just for views, and I wish I remembered it, but it's basically you're doing these behaviors for no other reason but then to draw attention to yourself, and people do some really cringeworthy things.
Yeah.
I don't want to override your statement though, Jen. So go ahead and finish, and then mention that one that we saw with the 12-year-old girl doing the dance.
I don't remember that, so you might have to mention that in your comment. But
Okay, go ahead.
but I was saying it breaks my heart because I think there's such an amazing thing in people being themselves. We're all made so uniquely.
Uh-huh.
And it makes me sad that someone would think that they don't have something to bring to the table that would be interesting to the
Yeah.
point that they would have to act like somebody else.
Right.
I mean, there's a part of me that gets it, because I know that we have, some more than others, this, wanting to be liked and wanting to be seen and
Right.
heard and acknowledged. But those are the two that I was thinking of, that
Okay.
particular movement, and then someone just not liking who they are.
Right.
And then so putting forth this facade, and I think that's kind of what I did. Glenn kind of mentioned this too, about feeling like if I were fully me, people wouldn't get it or wouldn't understand or wouldn't like me.
Yeah. Right.
And so and I never saw it as me not liking myself.
Hmm.
I just saw it as it might not be accepted. I was afraid
Right.
that it just wouldn't be accepted.
Right. 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 But yeah, in my opinion, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I think that, obviously I'm biased, but I think that you being yourself is the best thing ever. It really is. And I think that's probably true about most people. If you're being yourself, then you're the best thing ever.
Yeah.
So, just real briefly, so Jen was talking about TikTok, and there was a 12-year-old girl whose mother just died, and there was a popular. They have these dances or challenges that go on TikTok, and she did a dance for TikTok next to her mother's casket. Now, for all I know, maybe it wasn't a real casket. Maybe, she was at a friend's funeral parlor and there's no body in there or whatever. But just the implication, she said, my mom died and I'm at the memorial, and she played the music and did a dance next to the coffin. Real or imagined, this is where we're going as a society, and it's to get views, to draw attention to yourself, and it's happening earlier and earlier, and it's a little scary to me. So anyway, moving forward, what other reasons do people knowingly choose to be something they are not? To play off what Jen said, I was thinking about low self-esteem. And you kind of already filled that out, Jen, but that's the one I'm going with. It's the only thing I can think of. So if you don't like who you are, then you might pretend to be someone else, like Jen said, because you don't feel like they'll accept the real you. I can certainly relate to that more in the past than I can now, because now, I've been through so much that I wouldn't waste 5 minutes trying to be someone that I'm not, or pretending to be someone else to please someone or to try to fit in with a group. I've been in many group situations, church situations, work situations, things like that, where I see people, like I mentioned earlier, the culture and people acting like they think is expected in the office culture. And I refuse to do that. So that means I'm on the outside. If I don't fall in line with whatever the environment is, then I'm not going to be invited to all the parties, and I'm not going to, be on the trips and stuff. Well, I don't want to be. If I'm having to join some fake plastic office culture that's not real at all, and and you guys know about this, and it's the platitudes and the like fake it till you make it, and this positivity, like if someone says something negative, then they're a Debbie Downer, or they're guilted and shamed by being realistic about something. This is huge in work environments. I've noticed this, that different offices, different work environments, they all have this commonality, and there is a work environment or a culture in any job situation. It seems like to me, I could be wrong about that, but that's what I have seemed to notice. So my answer to this one is self-esteem issues, or not liking who you are would be a big reason why you would pretend to be someone else. I think that's probably a pretty common one. What do you think, Len? What other reasons do people knowingly choose to be something they are not?
Pretty much fear, risk. It all relates, I think, to what's gonna come back. and whether you really want to hear
Right.
it. Yeah,
Right.
I think you two covered it pretty well.
Okay. All
Thanks.
right. We'll pop the next one in there. Moving forward. All right. Other than abuse, survival, and ridicule, verbal put down, and the opinions of others, etc., a sufficient reason for not being myself. Other than abuse, survival, ridicule, verbal put down, and the opinions of others, etc., a sufficient reason for not being myself. I can't think of any good reason for not being yourself. Well, actually, some just this is an outrageous example. With this vaccine stuff and all the stuff going on in the world. There's like flight restrictions and things. If you don't have it and all of that. But more serious than that, if it ever got to the point where they're putting people, and this is conspiracy theory. This isn't happening, at least here in America and the Western world. But there's a conspiracy theory out there that eventually they're going to herd people up in concentration camps. If you don't take it and all that. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I can see that if it did, and I was asked, I'm sure they'll have some kind of proof. They'll need some kind of proof, but I would lie to avoid being herded up and put away somewhere. It's an easy lie for me. Just because I don't think they have the right to arrest me for something like that. That's just my personal opinion. And so I would think that to be separated from the one I love and to be manhandled and handcuffed and taken somewhere where I don't want to go for that purpose, I might lie. But that's the only thing. I can't think of any other good example, honestly. No reason. Well, see, I made a mistake in answering that because Glenn put right in the question survival. So other than survival, nope, I can't think of any. Scratch that because I forgot about that was in the question. I can't think of a single reason, guys, why you shouldn't be yourself other than the things that are mentioned in there. What do you think, Jen?
If you're acting.
Oh, acting. Well, there you go. Well, yeah, if you're acting, you can lie. You can.
If you're an actor.
Actor, yeah, right.
In a play, not in life.
Actor. Right. Exactly. I think the question implies that there's no good reason. I think that's intentional. There's no good reason to not be yourself. What do you think, Glenn?
No, I can't see it either. I just think if you're prepared to accept that people are going to, if you're going to be yourself, then you've got to accept that people are going to have an opinion. And you've got to be prepared for that opinion, no matter what it is.
Right.
And it might not always be what you want to hear. So, is that such a big deal? No, right. I don't think so. You'd rather be yourself and get someone to give you honest feedback than be somebody else and then someone come back and what are you going to do? How are you going to process something that comes back when you have put on a facade? It's just a total waste of time, in my opinion.
I agree.
Can't be bothered with that. Too much energy required.
I gotcha. And then, as is usually the issue, anytime you have to lie about who you are, you have to remember what lies you told and who you told them to, if you're not being honest about yourself. And that can be troublesome at best. Okay. Are there any circumstances where there are advantages in hiding myself? What do you think, Jen? Are there any circumstances where there are advantages in hiding yourself?
Annie made a really good point earlier up. Okay. Let me see if I can find it. Not sharing everything is discernment. I used to just share everything.
Yeah. Overshare.
Overshare. Yeah. And really and truly, I wasn't trying to be weird. I was just, I think it was almost an attempt to make the other person more comfortable. And because I'll be honest, I was desperate for connection and friendships, and I felt like, hey, what better way to fast track this bad boy than pour all my stuff out there? I learned pretty quickly that that's not good.
Right.
Unfortunately, it put me in the line of some toxic friends and an ex-husband. I didn't realize that, there are people out there that'll use that against you. So I think, hold on, let me get back to the question. I think maybe not my whole self, but just being mindful
Yeah.
about not sharing everything. So it's not necessarily like hiding or lying or acting. It's just being a little more measured about what, how much I share about
Yeah.
myself with people. And then letting it take a more natural course,
Right.
To scope people out and make sure they're safe. Like
Right.
we talked about the other
Mhm.
show.
Sure. Jan John says, whenever you're under the authority of others who will take advantage of you if they know the real you is one circumstance. What do you think of that?
Whenever you're under the authority of others who will take advantage of you if they know the real you is once. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's sometimes hard to decipher,
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know how to put into words my thoughts
It's
with that.
hard. Yeah, it's hard to put in. So that's a good point, John. Whenever you're under the authority of others who will take it. So if you know that you're under the authority of someone, and if you are yourself, they're going to take advantage of that. They know that, or that they're going to exploit that in some way.
Yes, exploit. It's a good word.
Exploit. Yeah, of course, that might be a reason. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I really wouldn't. And of course, it depends on the situation itself. And there may be times that it would be more advantageous to just go along to get along. But yeah, I think we're making the point overall that it's better to always be yourself. I think that's the reigning point here. Okay, did everyone answer that one?
No.
Okay, go ahead, Glenn.
I would say the more toxic elements of social media has conditioned people to not be themselves.
Oh yeah,
It's almost a given that you're not going to be yourself, from what I understand. And I'm old, but the younger ones could probably elaborate more. But it just seems to me that, like influencers and Instagram, it's all one big illusion. Who's real?
True. No, I alluded to this earlier. The idea of people posting what they think people want to hear rather than the reality of who they are or their own real opinions. But you're taking it to another level. You mentioned Instagram. There's all these filters on photos and things. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the filter, but it's not the reality. And Jen and I listened to a YouTube channel where she points this out. She'll go and find a post on Instagram or Facebook or something, and she'll prove that it's been photoshopped. In some cases, she even finds the original photo. I don't know how she does it, but she finds the original
Reverse
photo.
image.
Oh, okay. Well,
Search.
Jen knows. Reverse image. Okay, so she'll show the filtered, faked photo next to the real photo. How embarrassing. I mean, I have had times where I didn't like a picture and I wish I could erase it, or I wish people didn't see it. So I understand that. But now you can present an image of yourself that's totally doctored. It's not the reality. And I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it happens all the time. So you make a good point there, Glenn, in social media, especially. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are doing that. They're taking advantage of the technology that we have in order to hide themselves in some way. Or
well, look at the dating apps too, Chris. Not that I've been on there, but surely there are people there that are not being real because they think it's an advantage to not be real.
Oh, sure. Sure.
But where does that get you eventually?
Well, that brings us to Yeah, right. That brings us to our next question. Are there any circumstances where there are advantages in hiding yourself? Are there any wait, no, wait. Oh yeah. What are the possible consequences of not being myself? That's the one I meant
Oof.
to read. What are the possible consequences of not being myself? What do you think, Jen? You had
I
an
just was I
audible
just
reaction.
I was thinking, if you're not fully yourself, is that lying? When you're
Yeah.
thinking about these dating apps, if you're not sharing everything, I mean,
Yes.
I guess it's lying by omission. But then you get into the whole catfishing thing. Oh, geez. My goodness.
And I think that's a horrible thing to do to someone. And I mean, obviously, there was a whole show, might still be around, and certainly you'd be able to
Yeah,
watch repeats of
catfishing,
it.
I think.
Catfishing is a term that 10 years ago we had no idea what that was. You'd think, oh, you're going
No,
fishing
going
off.
fishing. Yeah,
Yeah.
catfish. I love catfish.
Yeah. But no, it's it's a horrible thing to do. You set up a fake profile of someone and even get to the point where you're texting back and forth and someone falls in love and they come to visit you and you're not anything like you represented. You got a picture of some actor or someone else's Facebook profile and you make it your own. That to me is lying. It's out and out lying. I mean, you can paint it any way you want, but in order to do that, you have to be willing to be a liar. And it's just a shame. It's a shame to do that to anyone.
Yeah. When you're done, I'd like to.
Yeah, I just was going to add, if you're causing someone to be in love with you online or whatever, you're having someone fall in love with an illusion that you've created. It's not even the real you. And you could say,
took my
well,
point.
oh no, well, go ahead and make the point, Jen. Go ahead.
You already did. You did. I'll expound on it. It's honest and at both ends. Like I quote unquote fell in love with someone being themselves.
You're breaking
If
up
they,
really bad.
hold on.
Sorry, Jen. Why don't you go back out and come back in real quick?
I turned on the Wi-Fi because
Oh,
you were
there you
breaking
go.
up earlier.
That's
That's better.
Make your point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was saying it could come from both ways. Like I ended up falling in love, quote unquote, with someone who was not being themselves. And honestly,
Right.
this is really weird, but I think in a way I sort of fell in love with myself because
Right.
he was mirroring me.
Right. Wow. Good point.
It's
Yeah.
very strange. And then, as the years went on after we got married, that the real him, as they say, the mask dropped and the real him came
Right.
out. And I was like, what? Who are you? Like, where's this
What?
person that I met in the beginning?
Yeah.
And I think Glenn said something earlier. I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but he was saying if somebody, I'm going to paraphrase, but if
Sure.
how can somebody be safe and how can they truly, gosh darn it, I can't remember, but it was like, if you're not being fully you, how do you know someone actually is your friend or likes you? I'm totally botching it, but
No. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're saying if you're pretending to be someone else, how do you know you're being accepted for who you are if you're being someone else?
Yeah. And let's all be honest, it's work not being ourselves. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So when you have
Yeah.
a friendship, or a relationship, there comes a point where you're just tired, and then when you start being yourself, because you're just exhausted.
Yeah.
Then the other person could potentially be like, who the hell are you?
Yeah. Who have I been getting to know all this time if it's not
gosh.
you?
Yeah. And I always think about, my experience with you and us getting to know each other. You were up front. You laid all the cards out on the table, even things that were hard for you to share, like
Sure.
really hard. And,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this before, that time we were hanging out at your sister's and she brought up the DUI.
Yeah.
I got upset because I was like, what if you had told me about that yet? And I'm so glad you did. But I thought, wow, that was a fight waiting to happen. Like,
In your face, Shannon.
So you were being fully you, and you were sharing the wonderful parts of you, but also the things in your past that you were embarrassed about and not so proud about. And You just laid it all out there. It was wonderful.
And I'm glad I did. So that's a good example. And this isn't patting myself on the back. I'm not even the one that brought it up, but I'll just say I am so glad that I did, because there's no bombs waiting to go off in my face at some point that I didn't share.
Yeah.
Not a single thing.
Nope.
There's not some friend that I haven't talked to in 30 years that's going to come tell some story to Jen that she's going to go, oh, well, I didn't know that about you. No, it doesn't exist. And I can go to sleep every night knowing that I have been honest and upfront, at least with Jen. I'm not saying, I'm not pretending like I've always done that in my entire life with everyone. I haven't. I mean, I'm ashamed to say that there have been times, it's not, I didn't look at it as out and out lying, but there are things that I definitely omitted about myself. If there were more time, I'd tell the story again about that job that I applied for, and that the DUI that I got. I'll just reference it and say, I thought it was off my record and I didn't disclose it, and I almost didn't get the job because of that. And rightfully so. I learned a valuable lesson then. So, and that was before I met Jen. So I learned a valuable lesson. Go ahead and disclose everything, and then that way nothing blows up in your face later. I think it's a good way to live your life, just in my opinion. What do you think, Glenn? What are the possible consequences of not being myself?
Well, for someone like me, it's going to be being found out.
Exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like it. So I wouldn't do it for a start. But the people who do it to obviously mislead or, lead someone down the garden path, don't really care about consequences. They're looking at what can I get out of it, not
exploitation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that's the consequence from my point of view.
Okay.
It's a huge deterrent. Not that I do it anyway.
Perfect. Yeah.
No, but being exposed is not nice. I would imagine so.
No, well, I don't have anything to add other than what we already said. So we'll ask our last question and we'll say goodnight to everybody. Is it possible to not stay true to yourself and yet live fruitfully in the world? I think this is the best question, the whole lot. Is it possible to not stay true to yourself and yet live fruitfully in the world? And I'll answer first.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, there you go, Jen. No, it's not. How can you live fruitfully in the world if you're not true to who you are? And this is true along different religions in the world even. This concept is very, very clear. And the Greeks, be true to yourself, and throughout philosophy and like I said, different religions, it is about being true to yourself and not lying and not being fake, being real, being authentic. These are important things, and it certainly is important in our lives. Just in my opinion, of course. To be honest with yourself first and foremost. I mean, how can you be honest with other people if you're lying to yourself about who you are? So it starts with you. And then going back to what Nez said earlier, using scripture, talking about what Jesus' command, love your neighbor as yourself. There's a real, it's more than an implication there. It's that we do love ourselves, not in a narcissistic way, but in order to be able to get to the point where we love others, there has to be some love for ourselves. So to get to that point, if we're not being true to ourselves, how are we ever going to do that? How are we going to love anyone else or be kind and be empathetic towards anyone if we're not doing that for us? That's first. It's the whole, we've talked about it so many times. It's the whole, help get your own mask right first, on the plane.
Oxygen mask.
Oxygen mask,
not a
right.
Masquerade mask.
Not a masquerade mask, right. Before you help someone else. And the reason for that is a good one. If you pass out while you're trying to help someone else, you're not going to be any good to anyone, including yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's such a good analogy of life.
Yeah.
Get yourself right, and then you can help others. I love it.
Yeah.
What about you, Jen? Is it possible to not stay true to yourself and yet live fruitfully in the world? What do you think?
I think this depends on what people think is fruitful, what their definition of fruitful is. Because when I think about a narcissist, yeah, I think it is possible for them to not stay true to themselves in the sense of who they actually are and be fruitful. I think it's one of their tactics of being fruitful in their own definition of fruitful. Getting things and using people and exploiting people. You know what I
Sure.
mean? But someone who's not doesn't have a personality disorder and is healthy or somewhat
Right.
healthy. No, I don't think it's possible to
Right.
live a fruitful world if you're not being yourself.
Right.
Fruitful
I
in the
agree.
world.
I agree. What do you think, Glenn? Is it possible?
I can't comment for anybody else, so I'll take the personal experience. I think it's a difficult question to answer objectively if you haven't been on both sides of the fence. So I'm going to say the difference between one side and the other side is like quantum level.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say in my position now, I would say no way. But if you asked me that question when I was on one side of the fence, I would have said, well, hang on, I can get through. That's not that. It's like Jen said, what's fruitful? I think fruitful changes its definition depending on which side of the fence you're on.
Sure. Okay.
You know, you don't see the potential of what can open up before you when you're sitting on the other side.
Right.
Only when you get there and it opens up, you think, oh my goodness, I didn't know this existed.
Right.
So it's a
Right.
different ball game. Yeah, quantum. That's the answer.
Beautiful. Thank you, Glenn. All right, and we got through all the questions, and it's just after the top of the hour, so we're doing pretty good. We finished with a quote, and I'll read that out real quick. To conclude, Lewis Carroll reminds us, in the end, we only regret the chances we didn't take. Imagine the gifts you can bring to others by just being yourself. What a great way to end the write-up, Glenn. I'm realizing the quote itself, the first one at least, was from Lewis Carroll. But great words to live by. So there you have it, guys. That ends the broadcast for tonight. Tonight's topic, written by Glenn, Being Myself, Conscious Deception. I appreciate all the work he put into that. Appreciate everyone that has stopped in and said hello in the chat. I see that Janet came in, and I didn't say hello to her, so hello, Janet. Sorry, I was a little late getting to the button on that one. We're glad that you're here as usual. I think that you know how much we appreciate you, and also my friend John Dons out there from California. Appreciate you stopping in. Doesn't matter if you're late. Hopefully you'll go back and listen to the broadcast. And I haven't forgotten, John, that you want to talk about narcissism. I think that was one of the topics that you said you'd like to hear more about, if I don't have that incorrectly. So that'll be coming. Annie quoted me, said, Jason, what you said, go ahead and disclose everything, and that way nothing blows up in your face. I mean, that's the way I decided to live. I didn't want things like that to happen. So by disclosing everything, nobody can come back after the fact and put a bomb. Just like Jen said, that's what my sister was trying to do, I believe. And we get along great. I love her to death. But that's something that people do sometimes. They might not even realize how devastating it can be. But because I had been upfront with Jen, it didn't cause any problems. She has repented.
It caused more problems with Shannon and me than it did. I mean, not that it caused a huge problem.
Oh, good point.
It reflected more on her than it did on you because you had disclosed the truth.
Right. Good point.
I was like, whoa.
That's another thing to consider too. Yeah. Okay. That's it for us, guys. Again, thank you for being a part of the broadcast. Thank you, as usual, to both Glenn and Jen for doing this with me. It is my great pleasure to have all you guys here. And let's say goodnight to the people. We'll start with Glenn.
Oh, my mouse is difficult. Good night, everybody.
Darn mouse.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
But, yeah, hope it was a little bit informative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you so much for contributing in the chat and everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Glenn. Jen, say goodnight to the peoples, please.
Yeah, I second that. I really appreciate everybody participating in the chat and
Love it.
sharing your thoughts and your experiences. And thank you, Glenn, for such a great write-up. And
Yeah,
it's always
fantastic.
nice to self-reflect. And your
Yeah,
questions
it
are
is.
always they always guide us into that place of self-reflection. And it's being challenged, self-challenge. It's good. Good night, everybody. We love you guys, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good night and a good week.
All right, guys, that's it for us. I hope everyone has a great week. We will, of course, return next Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I just am going to say in passing, I really like StreamYard. I like that we can get through a whole 2-hour broadcast without much problems. And gosh, we love you guys. We appreciate all the few fairly new listeners that we have, especially your contributions, Nez Lover. Really enjoy your comments as well. And the regulars, Annette and Janet and John and my buddy Rob and just everybody. If I didn't mention your name, it's not intentional. Thank you for being part of the broadcast. All right, so that's it for us. Thank you again for joining us on our broadcast, True Story Live. See you all next week. Have a great one. Until then, good night and God bless. Thanks for listening.